filming, Perry get up in the middle of the night and walk out to the bar?
No.
There's a question. Yeah.
Jana, could you talk a little about the writing process? Those of us who have elderly parents can relate very much to the loss of memory, the loss of self, the frightening part of that, but also the poignancy of caring for someone like that. And can you talk about a little about where that came from and how you put this story together for your own life?
Yeah, well, Perry wanted to do a Western on his ranch, and I'm not someone who'd seen a lot of Westerns and didn't really have many ideas for a Western, but then I thought I could write a story, a drama that could be set there. My grandmother was suffering from dementia, whether it was Alzheimer's or not, and my mother-in-law, and so I was witnessing a lot of this, and I think it was just on my mind a lot, and that was the inspiration for the characters, like the notes, all the notes that you see written around. My grandmother did that to compensate for a long time while she was still living alone, and that actually really inspired me. And the idea of Perry says in the movie, the one thing I'd like to forget is the only thing I seem to remember. I think that happens a lot with someone who is in the throes of Alzheimer's. They will focus on one memory, and a lot of times it's something pretty benign, and this was the worst thing that ever happened to him, or the worst thing he ever witnessed was the thing that kept coming back to him, and so that was really where it started. But in terms of the actual writing, we just were on the phone all the time. I have a freelance writing business called 9:30 Creative, and that comes from the fact that at 9:30 p.m. I was on the phone because he was in Los Angeles, and so we were on the phone talking and figuring out the story. I came up with the story idea, but I couldn't have done it without Perry saying, well, go back and think about this, and what he kept telling me was, less is more all the time. So I would just read, he wouldn't say, cut this scene, cut that scene. He would tell me, read it through and see what's unnecessary, what does not advance the story. But for the first year that we worked together, we actually were working on a comedy, believe it or not. So, yeah, and then we shifted gears. But during that year, I read a lot of screenplays. He would send them to me. I learned how to use Final Draft, which is sort of a foolproof screenwriting software, which puts it all into the right format for you. And that, I think that and realizing that I could do this was what happened. I mean, I had never written something this long. And since then, I've written another screenplay, I've written 2 novels, which are not published yet, if anyone knows how to get them published right now, and working on some other things. So I think it just sort of opened up the floodgates for me.
There's so many beautiful lines in this film, so many beautiful, succinct lines. But, for example, it's been a long time since I dreamed. Dreaming is about the future. Isn't that great? What a great line.
What I think of when I watched that scene, I love that line too. Bryan Kaplan, who plays Luke, he kept laughing. We have all these takes of him laughing. He just got the giggles and he could not stop laughing.
He was laughing because I was in my underwear.
Right, exactly. And that's the day, that was one of the days that my family was visiting, and they were like, why is he wearing underwear all day? And he's talking to everybody, and
I mean, it's hard to, it's so interesting, so many things about filmmaking. It often seems so weird what you're doing on a set, when you're on a set. And so many odd things like that last scene that we shot during the day, and we lit it for night. I mean,
with the one with you and Sarah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, it's just, one of the things Jana did that I thought was so great is I had this location, there's this old barn, and then beside it, a little ways up the dirt road, is a barn like it that fell down. So she wrote the whole idea of the barn falling down so we could use that location. So when it was time to be in the collapsed barn, it took nothing. We just moved over to the collapsed barn.
And I actually had never seen the ranch. Perry had described it and sent me pictures until I wrote the script. And then we went out there in the summer of 2013, I think, and I thought, ooh, a little bit of the geography, I need to make a few changes, but most of the dialogue and like the most prominent scenes is very, very similar to what I started with. We made changes elsewhere, but those were sort of the things that held the story together, pretty much stayed the same.
Yes.
I have a question. I have a little bit of, I guess, inside knowledge because I saw a lot of the stuff that Jana was working on. And I'm wondering now that after you've been through all the festivals and seen the film as a total entity so many times, do you have any regrets about the things that you cut? Because I know you had to cut some things, and I distinctly know 2 scenes that I was like, oh.
Oh, there's some stuff, you remember the stuff there, yeah.
Yes.
Well, I ended up cutting my favorite moment for myself.
Which one?
As an actor, I had to cut it out of the film. I mean, that's how tough editing is. I had to chop my favorite moment out.
Was that when you were in the truck and forgot where you were and the doctor?
No, this is another scene that just turned out to be redundant between Sara and me, where she's very angry with me, where I said,
What? I'm never angry with you in the movie. What are you talking about?
You remember the scene where I say, the dolly, the horse responds to you, and then I say, Luke does too?
Oh, yeah.
And Sara, the
That's
character,
not
just says, yeah.
Oh, yeah. I really got
Anyway,
that too.
Sam, I can't, it's not me. Sam would do stuff that I didn't think of. He would just do things, because I had a long time to prepare. I had to prepare for 2 years. But Sam backs up and he tips his hat. Do you remember that? I tipped my hat to you.
Yeah.
It just came out of the character. And I loved that, but I had to cut it. So there's a lot of stuff that's lost. You know, it's the way it works. I mean,
Otherwise, you'd have a 4-hour-long movie.
Well, we did pretty much at the beginning. We had a 2.5-hour version.
yeah, that's
and
true.
But the editor we ended up with an editor, Gillian Hutching, who did this incredible job where she only cut out a couple of scenes, but she would cut like a minute here, and there was, when Luke walks to Sam's house and knocks on the door and then sees all the notes around, at first we saw him walk like a mile up the road, and we were like, this is sort of boring. We thought it was boring too. So she did a masterful job at just cutting little things that didn't necessarily, change the story. But another thing I wanted to say about, so Perry said that his character, Sam, would just do things and he wasn't planning them. But the same thing happened when I was writing the dialogue, because people will ask me, sort of like Mike did, when I was writing, I didn't have to sit and think, what is Sara going to say next? Oh, and then Luke should say this. And I don't even remember how most of the dialogue came to me. It was sort of the characters were almost driving it and telling me what to say. It sounds a little crazy, but that's really true.
Your turn.
Yeah. Well, questions, anybody?
Hi, so just a comment sort of. My son noticed in the very beginning of the movie that as the first couple of scenes went by, the camera seemed very fixed. It wasn't like cameras on booms and things.
Yeah.
So is that something that you intentionally did and carried out through the course of the movie? Because I can only recall maybe 2 scenes where the camera actually just rotates or pan.
You're absolutely right.
So
Yeah, it's intended to be a very old-fashioned movie. I grew up with old black and white movies. I love them. I love the way they're shot. I hate a lot about new filmmaking. I don't know how you all feel about it, but I hate this new style of jiggly camera, always bouncing around. They actually have somebody on the set these days whose job it is to wiggle the camera. Isn't that ridiculous? I mean, Clint Eastwood says what they consider good modern filmmaking is what he considered bad filmmaking. It's that simple. And all the old school stuff was locked off cameras. You didn't move the camera around very much. And so when you do move it, then it counts for something. There's only a few places where the camera moves, does what's called dolly, and then it means something. You do it for a reason. It's all those signature things, if you use them sparingly. It's like if you wrote something and you had an exclamation point at the end of every sentence, it wouldn't mean anything anymore. But if you use them carefully, they mean something. Close-ups, there are very few close-ups. One of the things I love about old films, and Russ and Jana and I would talk a lot about this, we watched lots of movies together so we'd have a common vocabulary of movies that we could refer to. And the old films would allow you to see the actors together. You'd see Clark Gable and Myrna Loy in one shot together. You'd see what was happening between them. You'd only cut to them individually, really, when they were separated emotionally. That's the old style of filmmaking. The theory is you only separate them in individual shots when they're emotionally at odds with each other or separated. So it's very much intended to be an old-fashioned movie. It's an old-time movie for people that miss the old-time movies, you know. Or somebody said to me once, it's a new film with old values about our film, and I like that. That's it.
How was it funded?
Sorry?
How was it funded?
Right here. Hey, I saved my whole life so I could do this, and it was worth it. So that's how I did it. Who knows whether we'll get our money back. It was never something any of us did for money. It was never about money. It was about the love of it. And that's why I say to you, if you've got something like that for yourself, do it. Yes. Yeah.
I was wondering how strictly you stuck to the dialogue that was written versus working it together. Did you change dialogue during scenes? Did you improv any of it, or was it really?
I'd say a lot of it was the same, but here and there, something changed because that's an actor's instinct, and I was, you know, sometimes they surprised me and I was excited about what they were doing that was different, or the tone with which they said it might not have been what I had in my head, but when they said it, it sounded better, you know? So, like every so often we would be sitting around the table at Perry's house and Bryan and Sara would be, or Perry would be talking about a scene that they were doing the next day, and they'd say, what if we cut out that line and said this instead? And it's like, oh, that's better. Yeah, let's do that. But
That's something I want to say
Yeah.
about. Jana was so remarkable about that. That's so hard to hear somebody always chipping away at your work, criticizing it. Anybody about any work. It's really hard. And you listen to me chip away at your work for 2 years and then develop all these. And she was wonderful about it, just wonderful. It's one of her greatest strengths, and she has a lot.
thank you.
I didn't like that because I don't want to run out with this.
Did that answer your question?
It did. Cool.
So is that a common process to have the writer there working with the movie?
Oh, God, no, not at all. Usually, I can tell you from the actor's standpoint, for Perry as well, usually, you know, you get a script, and nowadays everything is, okay. The year that we made this was a really interesting creative year for me. I went from doing an extremely big budget movie where I had a ton of executive responsibility. I was in charge of a lot. I was acting, I was coaching, I was puppeteering, I was doing voiceover, and it was a budget of like $200 million with a 400-person crew. Fast forward to at the summertime when we filmed this, there was a crew of 30, maybe?
Yeah.
And then there was us, and so it was a very intimate feeling to it. There's a point to this, I promise. I promise. So, like on a normal Hollywood movie, you'll get maybe a full script. The likelihood that you're going to get the full script is very small nowadays. And they'll do something obnoxious, like they'll send it to you on red paper, if you even get a paper copy at all. Or they'll email you just your pages, right, Barry?
Yep.
So you're basically like taking stabs in the dark at what you think is appropriate, and then you get on set, never having met the other actors before. It's literally like you walk up, they have somebody standing in for you to be lit. So you do like a really brief rehearsal, like super brief. Like, oh, you're gonna walk over there, okay, great, we're gonna set the camera, so the stand-ins come in and stand there, while you go, just wait, not knowing any of the other actors, and then you're expected to walk on set and boom. And getting back to your question, that's when it becomes difficult. To, like, if you have to do emotional material, and you know it has to be emotional, and keeping in mind that the scene that you just shot previously might have been from 2 weeks ago when you're at the supermarket having the best day of your life, that's when it becomes complicated to try to navigate your way through the acting part. But it's not usually like that. You don't usually get a chance to have such a great rapport with the writer and the other actors rehearsing, then going into it. That is why I had such a great time on this movie. That and Barney.
There was Barney's a burro who lives on the ranch and wanted to get in every shot, and so every time there were many times where he was on the boom mic, and we had to keep him out of every shot, but everyone also loved him. He was very, very sweet. I did, in addition to, so on the set, I was the script supervisor, which meant I kept track of what scenes we had done and what dialogue, and if we missed something, or if we missed a shot, we missed doing, over Perry's shoulder or something, I sort of kept track of that. And then I also did continuity, which meant that beautiful scene with them in the kitchen at the end. I was like, is he gonna put the top back on the sugar bowl? I really hope he's gonna. He did, because he's a professional, but I was like, I had to think about things like that, or he's not wearing his scarf, but he was yesterday, and he's about to start the scene. I better tell him.
And we shot that in two separate.
Exactly.
We shot that separated by a couple of days.
Yeah.
We had to because of the fires.
Yeah.
Right? So that's where really
Yeah.
the continuity.
Yeah, there were a few different wildfires surrounding the ranch. It did not touch us, but it was so smoky. They started filming that scene at night, and we had to abandon it. So when you see their performances, they had only shot, I think, the master shot where you see both of them, and then they had to come back a couple days later and bring that all back, and that was during the day, and they made it look like night. Was that accurate? And the scene at the very end with the lawyer was shot in the middle of the night.
That's right.
It was shot like, 1 in the morning or something. Luke Columbero, who plays CJ, had a curfew on the set of midnight. He was, by whatever SAG rules, he couldn't be on the set after midnight, so they shot all of his parts and then went back. But that's a testament to the lighting crew, because you can't tell that it was nighttime.
I'm glad you mentioned the lawyer, because I thought he was a wonderful little, short but wonderful little role in there. The most charmingly old-fashioned thing about this movie is that it has such an unmitigatedly happy ending, which I did not see coming, which I guess tells you something about the way that you think about movies now. And it's not a topic for which happy endings are really a part. So that must have been did you ever think about maybe leaving it a little more ambiguous, or?
I think I thought of the line, "Now you do," really early on. And I remember Perry was really surprised. He was like, "Oh my God." I mean, he was like,
I
"This
love
is
that.
so..."
From the moment I saw it, Now You Do.
But yeah.
And we put a lot of effort into filming Now You Do in such a way that it really echoed for you. I don't know if you guys noticed, but there's a shot, the camera dollies in on me when I say every man ought to have a home, when we're sitting on the porch at night about halfway through or 2/3 of the way through. And then we make the same move in on the lawyer when he says, "Now you do," to echo back to that, That was always critical. One of the things I love so much about your story, it doesn't bend,